Welcome to Bullshift, the podcast. My name is John DeGuy. I'm the host of the podcast and the author of the book, Bullshift. This is the podcast that talks about behavioral biases in general and specifically about how the financial services industry shifts your attention to make you feel more bullish. My guest this week is Kris Knutson. He's a PhD and he has nearly 20 years of teaching experience in Canada, Mexico, and Asia. He got his PhD in education from the University of Toronto, and his research focused on literary financial instruction for elementary school classrooms. He's passionate about investing and providing financial literacy education for people of all ages. For the past 2 years, Kris has been working with the United for Literacy and its financial literacy project with the goal of reaching out to children, youth, and adults. Kris, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
I always like to begin with people that do these really neat, niche-y type things to ask them to talk about the work that they do and the organization they're a part of. So I know that you're primarily involved in literacy. Tell me about what you do and how you do it, please.
Yeah, so we started out actually creating financial literacy materials for teachers to use in their classrooms. And so for the past 2 years, we've developed materials that range from grades 4 all the way up to grade 12. And recently, we've been branching out into adult education and reaching into adult communities of different areas to be able to expand that education outward. So in the last year, we've primarily focused on this outreach. So
Mhm.
showing people we have these resources, you can use them in your classrooms, and we're talking to teachers. We have these programs that we put on. We've done things like Facebook Lives events so teachers can attend or even play them in their classrooms. And we've done in-class presentations to students as well. So it's this whole idea of building a network of financial literacy education, a repository where teachers can get their information from for free because we're a nonprofit organization, and just be able to build this confidence. So when they talk to their students or when adults can talk to their children, they'll be able to build this financial literacy in their lives.
It's funny because a generation or two ago, the big taboo for what was and was not taught in school was sex. It was, we don't want teachers teaching our kids. And it was my view that part of why parents didn't want teachers teaching their kids is because they were afraid that the teachers might be fair, and parents had a certain viewpoint, often based on religion, that they wanted to put through. With financial literacy, it's a bit different. I think, this is my personal opinion, but I'm inviting you to correct me if I'm wrong, that part of why a lot of parents don't teach financial literacy is because they themselves feel as though they are financially illiterate themselves and are ill-equipped to teach, and therefore they might be a little more willing to offload that element of the child's upbringing to a more traditional classroom setting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's research on that. There's also research on teachers, where teachers, after they have that put on them, they themselves are uncomfortable speaking about financial topics just because of a general lack of knowledge. Just not, for one thing, not being taught in schools in the past, but also just that people don't tend to have these conversations about how are you doing with your finances? What should you be doing? And even access to professional help can sometimes be daunting. Like, where do you go to get this information? A lot of people turn to resources on YouTube or something, and they have to find this. And that's a big task, digging through all that information to find good information and being able to get this level of knowledge where you feel comfortable as a teacher or a parent for how you deliver this.
Yeah, well, certainly. And the problems with YouTube and social media is that there's a wide variety of input out there and information out there, and much of it is almost hucksterish, and you have to be very careful to maintain some quality control. What are your observations with regard to having taught both children and adults? Which demographic would you say is more receptive to learning about financial literacy and applying it maybe as they go forward?
Well, I think my simple answer to that, just to start, would be all of them are receptive. We've talked to adults, we've talked to children as young as grade 4. We've gone all the way up through high school, and at every level, they've all expressed interest in learning about finances. Different areas maybe. Some might be more interested in investing, or some might be more interested in planning their financial lives. But truthfully, it's been across the whole spectrum. There's been a lot of just a big hunger out there to learn about financial literacy. As far as the differences go, elementary children have been relatively unreached generally, because a lot of the financial literacy programs or financial program of any sort have usually started around grade 9 or in the middle school years at the earliest. And so there's research going into that saying that there needs to be more done earlier. And actually in the Ontario curriculum, they've started doing that, putting in the curricular objectives all the way down to grade 1. And so it is beginning to happen. But the grade, all the way from grade 1 all the way up to grade 12 to adults, they all are expressing a level of, I think there's this intrinsic desire, because they know it's an important part of life, and they want to find out how to succeed and have that impact their lives for the better.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the granularity of the curriculum at different levels, but could you perhaps share, to the extent that you know, what a typical grade 4 student might be learning about, and what a typical grade 8 student and what a grade 11 student might, at different points along the way in your secondary and pre-secondary education? What do we teach kids at what level and at what point in life?
In the early years, I would say it's more things like making change. What does money look like? How to what this coin means. What you use your money for. But in grade 4, we start to talk about topics like budgeting and how to save your money, where basics about saving, and really all of that is built on throughout the years. So when you get to the middle school years, you'll see topics about this is saving, this is investing, interest rates, and by the time you get to high school, it gets quite complex, where you go right into planning for your future. How do you decide if you use OSAP? How do you plan out your life now, so when you get to adulthood, you have a good financial plan set up? So it's really starting to be built in. So I'd say it's not so much different things being taught at different stages. It's rather the complexity increases as you go through the years, till when you get into high school, it's quite integrated in their business classes and all of those.
What about the payoff? What would you say, if you could look into the crystal ball and say 20 years down the road, once we've got a full generation of people having come through the school system, having been taught financial literacy for the first time, what do you think society would look like, and for good or ill, but hopefully for good, as a result of what we're teaching people today?
Well, I'm going to talk about what I've seen right now, just in general conversations with people who are already in adulthood. At the moment, and you might have run into this too, you'll talk to someone about terms. So, for example, you use the term TFSA. Mm-hmm. And a TFSA is quite an important savings or investing vehicle that you can use. But you talk to someone right now, and because that hasn't been taught, the only way to find out about it is by having a conversation or talking to a professional or doing the reading and research on your own. They'll say, "Oh, I'm going to buy a TFSA," or "I'm going to," I don't want to use a TFSA because TFSA is only for the rich, or these kinds of comments, because people just haven't had that exposure. So going back to your question, I think that in the future, once they have this knowledge, so for example, we have lessons on using a TFSA versus an RRSP that we created at United for Literacy in these packages we put together, that compare the advantages, disadvantages, like this asset is best in a TFSA and this one in an RRSP, right? Like who's going to tell you about a tax treaty and an RRSP when you're generally you have to find it on your own. But if you learn that in high school, which many of these things do, they'll have this knowledge. So I think even if they don't come out of their experts, there'll be this base knowledge that when they go through life, they can build upon, as opposed from trying to start from scratch when you already have a family and you're getting started in your career and you just don't have the language even at the beginning to get started.
Certainly, one of the things that I find, because in my day job, I'm a portfolio manager and I have clients as well. And one of the things that I hear, and I try often, I promise you, I try to keep things simple and clear. And people say that, oh, John, you're a good communicator, but they'll also say, John, sometimes it sounds like jargon and you use too many acronyms. I have one client who probably berates me quarterly about the use of acronyms, even because I think, for instance, if I say TFSA, everyone will know what a TFSA is. And most people do. But it's funny how even after many years of having been reminded, I need to catch myself to say, no, this is a tax-free savings account. And even then, I can argue that public policy people don't do us any favors because they call it a tax-free savings account, but it could just as easily be a tax-free investment account. It's an account that you put money in, you put in after-tax dollars, and you take the money out without paying tax. And I don't know how many people can understand that just because of the potential misdirection that comes from the way we name government programs. It's funny. So United for Literacy is doing a lot of really good work. Could you maybe offer some thoughts about I don't know how adults, because you work with adults as well, so we've been talking a little bit about children lately. Maybe we could talk about people who are now of a certain generation that didn't get the benefit of that, didn't get the benefit of being taught properly. How do they get access to financial literacy through the work that you provide?
Yeah, so I actually just want to make a little connection to what you said about the person you were working with first,
Yeah.
about using acronyms. So I was teaching a class, just a volunteer class in a library, and I had these people in the audience, and I was going through my, just giving some basic information about financial literacy, and I used the word ETF, and I know that you're a fan of ETFs and
I am.
for the low cost of entry and all, and so I used the word ETF, and I went through the whole thing, did the whole presentation, and this one person came up to me. He was probably late 60s, came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't think about what the rest of your presentation. I'll have to talk to you again sometime." But I had spent the whole time wondering what's an ETF. So you're right, having that getting, just being aware of those is really important. Um, I think for our work with adults, a lot of it lately has been coming through recommendations, through partnerships with, and because the people we work with are generally traditionally underserved groups and may not have had as much exposure over time. Some of them might be on programs like Ontario Works or these kinds of programs. So they're often trying to figure out, what do I do with a limited budget? Right. So the people that's been our focus, is people who have not necessarily had exposure or the access to these concepts, and are now trying to figure out, well, how do I budget with what I have? What programs can I use? How can I increase my income through these programs? And yeah, a lot of these have been done through partnerships, and it's been more recently because the outreach part of our program just started a year ago, and we started from zero.
Mm-hmm.
And it went first, like I said, to teachers, because that was our initial focus, and then word of mouth. We actually talked to we did some work with Advocates,
Mm-hmm.
the financial advisor group,
Mm-hmm.
and then with the Financial Planners of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're starting to do
Mm-hmm.
some talking and all this, and all of these things plus word of mouth have led from us working with teachers to more adults. I did a really neat workshop with adults last year where it was a class for women who wanted to figure out, okay, how can I budget? How can I get set up and begin to use the money I have? And a lot of these were single mothers, and they're like, and we had these conversations about, where can I find the money? So all of these groups are a lot of them are just coming through word of mouth, through organizational contacts and that. Yeah.
Right. It's funny because one of the ways that you and I became connected was, I had done some media work and you reached out, and I was delighted that you did. one of the organizations that I'm involved with is the CFFP, which I'm not going to just use it. I'm going to spell it out. It's the Canadian Foundation for Financial Planning. It's a true foundation that does a lot of pro bono work, and it does a lot of work to reach out to underserviced communities. So I guess the point that you and I agree on is that outreach is there if you're prepared to look for it, and for those people who want to learn. And what I'm hearing you say is that virtually everyone from virtually all walks of life wants to learn. So I think there's a large untapped opportunity to reach more people and to do more good. So it's all great, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. I want to talk to you also about what you see as being the challenges and barriers in terms of reaching more people and having an even greater impact. What would you say are the challenges you reach right now, you're encountering?
I think a lot of the challenge that we have when we're reaching out to people is that there can be this impression from people. First of all, they want to know about these things, but they don't know where to go.
Right.
And you need to have this connection. You need to find people who can put you together with people to get these conversations started. It can also be difficult just because of, again, with the people that we traditionally work with who are underserved at United for Literacy throughout their whole literacy and now in the financial literacy programs that they have. We found that there's because these different groups have different ways of looking at money. Different groups have just had traditional barriers to working with financial organizations in general, and these barriers have created sometimes this idea that these experiences aren't for me. They're, and so when we go in there and begin talking, say, hey, these are for everybody, right? They're like, oh, okay. And then there's a great curiosity to learn more. And so just this whole idea that, this is only for the rich. This is something that I'll never be able to access, right? These are programs that, and they don't even know. Like this is an example with let's say healthcare, right? There's a lot of great programs out there, and there's a lot of information, but a lot of times it's hard for people to begin the search process because there is so much. And a lot of these people, like I said, they're single mothers. So English can be their second language. Maybe the home countries they came from, there wasn't the same system set up, like even like the term TFSA, that doesn't exist in other places. Right. And so they don't have this access to information that we might have here in Canada. So those are some pretty big barriers that we found to getting out there. And yeah, so all of these things have caused, so it's been a lot of us reaching out. And one thing that's been interesting is we're not creating a market. Like we're not out there telling people evangelizing that they need to know about financial literacy. When we begin talking to people, the demand is clearly there.
Right.
And that's the one thing that's really interesting. It's a latent demand that people know they need to know this, but they don't know where to access. And so it's finding that matchup. And a lot of, like I said, it's been come through these relationships, this matchup between those who know who needs the information and coming to us to be able to deliver that and meet that need.
Okay. Now I have a question that's maybe not quite in your wheelhouse, but I think you might. I'm very curious about what you think, and it's with regard to advisor bias. So what you're doing is you're mostly going to people that are oftentimes underserviced and haven't really thought about financial literacy and have a base level of knowledge that's very low. The concern that I have, that I write about in my book Bullshift, and that I write about in my previous book Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry, is advisor bias. And it's an unconscious bias. It's an unwitting bias, which is to say advisors are good people. They have good intentions. They're not trying to give wrong-headed advice. But nonetheless, there's a problem where people who know they don't know, which is people who need to improve their financial literacy, are, because they're self-aware enough that they know that they need to approach someone to help them, oftentimes, especially if they have a reasonable amount of money. But the problem that it then becomes a first derivative problem where the person they approach thinks they know things because they're advisors who have what are called misguided beliefs. Advisors believe certain things to be true, but they're demonstrably untrue. So I'll give you a specific example of three things that were found in a paper that was released over 7 years ago. Research shows that mutual fund registrants very consistently chase past performance. Everyone knows that past performance is not indicative of what you might expect in the future. Pay no attention to cost, even though everyone knows cost is a major concern, and run concentrated positions, even though everyone knows you're supposed to diversify. And that these are advisors who are doing it not only with their clients, but they're doing it with themselves and their own portfolio, even after they retire. So it's not like it's an agency issue or a compensation issue. It's a problem where advisors actually believe things that are untrue. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am curious, for a person who's probably never had to contemplate this problem, what you think could be done to disabuse advisors of misguided beliefs as they themselves set out to improve the financial literacy of their clients.
I think I can answer this. Yeah. So one way that I look at this, because we were considering this when we were talking with some other people who were considering going into classrooms to teach, and these were financial individuals.
Right.
And one thing, we actually set up some of our lesson when we were working with them to kind of deal with some of these problems. And one thing that we did was that we told them, for one thing, understand the population you're going into. Because when you work or at least try as best you can to understand who you're working with. Not every group looks at money the same way as someone else. So just saying, for example, for a bias, let's say you come from a background where money is more of an individual thing. So you want to save your own money. You want to, what you do is a result of your individual efforts. If you go into a group, because many cultures will have an idea of a communal money, where just for a quick example, I am not Chinese, but I am married into a Chinese family. Okay. And so because of that, we both have different views of the way money is. So for example, monetary gifts on my side of the family, like an actual money gift, may not hold the same weight as a money gift from my other side of the family, just because of different ways that we look at money. When you approach those, then you have to think, okay, well, how do they hold money? And the second thing is, how do I hold money? Because when you start talking about what should be done, you're going to put people off if you're not aware when you approach them about, like, you got to know, I might be approaching this from too individualistic a mindset. So when I go into there, if I really want to be instrumental in meeting their needs on financial literacy or financial planning or whatever, I need to know what their needs are and not go and try and impose my needs on them. So that would be one thing. Another thing that people often think is, it might be a case, I actually don't know, what might be the case is that a lot of the people that we work with truly at this moment do not have money to invest. Mm-hmm. They literally are working as hard as they can. Like I said, they might be a single parent or who knows the background of the situation, but at that moment, they might not have the money. Just going back to my example of those single mothers I worked with that mm-hmm. class, when I went in there, and this was my fault, I was kind of under the impression that investing would be less of an interest because of the group I was working with. It was part of my presentation. I said, nope, I'm going to keep it in there. And then when we got to that was their favorite part of the whole presentation, because they knew that in the future they might get money, and they wanted to know how to, when that situation came, how to be prepared for that. So just thinking, going into a situation now and you think, oh, they don't have enough money to invest, it's still a good thing to talk about. So you're prepared when you do.
It's funny because Bolshiev talks about optimism bias, and the concern that I have is that a lot of people that have money are overly optimistic about what they might expect for the future and cavalier, and as a result are taking on perhaps more risk than they realize and then that they can handle. But it seems to me that when you're talking about and I'm trying to be respectful here, the low end of the market, the people who have relatively little money, optimism is a wonderful thing because it's motivational, it's aspirational. It gets people to think about, I might not have money right now, but by golly, if I work hard and I save and I pay my bills, at some point revenues are going to exceed expenses and I'm going to have some money left over. And when that happens, I'll be able to invest. And that's a wonderful thing. So one of the things I also like to say is that I'm not opposed to optimism. I'm opposed to optimism bias. And there is a difference. Bias is when you're just you just think bad things just don't happen to me because I'm special somehow. I wonder, when you're talking to these people and you're teaching them about investing, we touched on this earlier, but I'm curious. Talk to me about the importance of cost. Is that the sort of thing that people that are embarking upon an investment journey think about, or do they just have these wonderful visions of great double-digit returns dancing in their heads, or are they saying, no, I'm going to build a portfolio that's suitable and appropriate for me and my wants and needs, and I'm going to do it in a way that's as cost-effective as possible? How much do ordinary people that are just starting on the investment journey, irrespective of their age or their ethnic background, how much do they think about cost?
I think that from what I've seen, most people, as far as cost goes, so there's a couple of ways that I would answer this.
Okay.
First of all, is I don't have enough money to invest, as far as cost that way goes. And I think that there's the impression that you need to have, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or like of cash sitting there to be able to invest, as opposed to, being able to open up, a cheap, discount brokerage account and buy ETFs for free, right? For, a $10, diverse ETF or something like that. So first of all, that's prohibitive as far as cost. It's just this idea that I don't know how to get in. There's the time cost. I don't have the time to dedicate to this. I don't know where to start. I don't have time to research this. So I don't have that time to invest. I need to look after other things. As far as cost to investing, so do you mean more like trading fees and
no, product cost? Just the cost of owning an investment
fee
product
on a mutual fund or those sorts?
as compared to an index fund or an ETF, for instance.
Yeah. I would say that's not even at the point where we're beginning with people learning about investing, that would be more at the mid to advanced end.
Okay.
Because I think when most people, everybody, not just the people we work with, but most people I talk to who haven't done any investing, they think investing is buying a high flying stock that they see on the news and get into it. And then the cost would be, I can't afford to buy one share of this because it's $900, right? That's I think where at the level when you're starting out with people in their investing journey, that would be the cost. That would be the one on their mind. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if we can move towards something tangible. Are you familiar with any resources? I don't know if there are websites, but if people watching this or listening to this wanted to learn more about financial literacy, where could they go?
Well, I think a good place to start would be our website, unitedforliteracy.ca. We have a resource section where people can choose the financial literacy resources and look through. And like I said, we have from grade 4 to 12 right now, and we have some resources for parents to work with. And it's all free. There's no cost. There's no sign up. There's nothing. They just literally go on the site and download. So that'd be a good place to start. They're pretty in depth. There's tax lessons. Even an adult could benefit from that. There's also, there's a lot of good resources on the Canadian government websites. If you go on the Canadian government websites and you can search anything, for instance, TFSA, they give it's complex language wise, but it does give a good run through for learning about the different accounts, which I think would be a good place to start, learning about the different types of accounts, so that you can, differentiate, what you're really utilizing when you open one of these accounts and the benefits to you, depending on where you are in life.
Okay. So that's unitedforliteracy.ca.
Yeah, unitedforliteracy.ca.
Okay, I'm just gonna, what you do is you keep on repeating it, like you see in these infomercials. You keep on saying, Rebelsis for Belsis. So unitedforliteracy.ca. I just want to make sure everyone gets a chance to to get that down so they can go visit your website. All right, Kris, let's see if we can wrap this up. I always like to end with two things where I ask my guests to talk about what they would change and if they could do things differently. So the first is, that's bullshit. If it was up to you, what would you change in the way people do finance in Canada in 2024?
I think one thing that I would ask people to do is just to, first of all, really get familiar with, again, I'm big on the types of accounts because I think that's so important. I think people are underutilizing their tax advantaged accounts that they can have depending on where they're at and which one to use, because in which situation, depending on your income levels, or which ones to use, what your family life. That would be probably one of the most important things, is to really get understanding about those terms, because that's really valuable. The second thing I would say would be just to start learning, if you want to get into investing for the first time, start learning about the low cost options, because that'll allow you to compound early with smaller amounts. And the fees are often what keep people out. Or keep people behind. So I really think that those would be a couple of things I would encourage people to do.
Which brings us then to the second part of my question, which is shift happens. If it was up to you, how would you get people to do these things that you're talking about?
I think the best way to do it would be to begin to have, well, first of all, go to our website, unitedforliteracy.ca, and look up those resources and go through them, because they do go in depth into these topics, especially in the upper years, grade 11, 10, 11, 12, where we talk in detail about what a TFSA is, what an RRSP is, and tax credits, and all these kinds of things are in these lessons. So that would be a good place to start, whether you're an adult at any age. The second thing would be to begin to start reading up on these terms, and really find someone to talk to if you can, because then often when you go into even a bank, there'll be someone there who'll be willing to explain to you the terms and what these things mean. So I think that would be the biggest thing, is take action and begin learning these things so you can get started.
Great. Kris, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful. I'm a big believer in the need for doing more for financial literacy in Canada, and you're a shining light. We need more people like you. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
John DeGooey is a portfolio manager in Toronto and the author of the book Bullshift: How Optimism Bias Threatens Your Finances. Bullshift is available online and in bookstores everywhere. The opinions expressed in this podcast should not be construed as investment advice. Bullshift, the podcast, is produced by TalkShoe, a division of IOTM.